So my name is Ashley Holland. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am one of the assistant directors for student engagement here at the university, and super excited to have you all here with us and our four fantastic, fabulous alums that are going to be answering some questions and giving you all some tips and advice and all the things about self-care as you enter the adulting world. So I'm going to kick it off to Alex first.
Hi, my name is Alex. I use she, her, she, her pronouns. I graduated in 2019. Um, what else should I say? Do I say anything else? Is that
You want to say
all?
what your major was?
Oh, my major was American Studies, focusing on race and ethnicity.
Love that.
And I
Where,
have a job.
where, oh, nice. Where are you now? Where are you now? What are you up to now, Alex?
So I live at home, free rent. I live in Richmond, Virginia, and I work for an educational best practices firm. And I'll popcorn to Jessica.
Thanks, Alex. It's good to be with all of you. I'm Jessica or Jess, go by either. I use she, her, hers pronouns. And I graduated, it's gonna be a mouthful, but I graduated in 2019 with an interdisciplinary degree. And then I got a master's in educational psychology in 2020. So I am really grateful that to be speaking to y'all about self-care. It's a practice I feel I need a lot of help on. So hopefully maybe we can hear some tips from y'all. But I currently serve as the presidential fellow in President Ryan's office, and I also run a youth educational nonprofit locally in my hometown of Fluvanna, where, as I was explaining to the panelists earlier, I moved back home when COVID hit, and I'm now in like my middle school poster covered 12-year-old Jessica bedroom. So that's quite a bizarre experience. But anyway, I'll popcorn it to Dwayne.
Okay. Hey everyone, I'm Dwayne. I graduated from UVA at 2017. I studied engineering. I'm still here trying to get my PhD in material science and engineering. Let's see. I'm a mess actually. I'm trying to apply to med schools right now. So I'm really not the best person for this for this adulting 101 room. But yeah, I'm also a volunteer EMT firefighter in the county. So popcorn. Sorry, forgot how this works. Who hasn't gone yet? Popcorn to not Alex, not Jess. Jonatul, can I popcorn to you? Is that allowed?
Hi, y'all. My name is Jonatul Pramanik. I use she, her pronouns. I currently work as a program coordinator for Multicultural Student Services. I've been working at UVA for almost coming up 3 years. I graduated in 2016 with a bachelor's in Spanish and pre-med, and then I got my master's here as well in 2017 in public health, and then kind of entered the workforce a year after taking a gap year. But excited to be here. It's kind of funny that Dwayne mentioned like adulting and like feeling like an adult, because I think right before this conversation, we were all kind of joking about what does it even mean to be an adult, and that even though we're all in like different parts of our lives and the perception is that we should be adults, like there's still parts of us that like don't feel like feeling that perception. So it's up there. And so yeah, so excited to have this conversation with y'all, and I hope y'all find this useful.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. And thanks to all the panelists for introducing themselves. Duran, do you want to introduce yourself real quick? I see you just popped in here.
Yeah, no doubt. Duran Allen, he, him, his pronouns. I work in the Office of Dean of Students closely with Ashley and Jonathan in particular. Glad to see all you all here joining us, and thanks to our presenters today. Thank you.
Awesome. All righty. Well, we will kick it off with some questions. What does self-care mean to you, and how has your perception or interpretation of self-care changed after you left UVA?
I can start. So self-care, I think is very much still in the buzzword phase where everyone like throws it around, not really having serious meaning behind it, like, oh, face masks and bath bombs and margaritas, and like self-care is way more than that. I think that self-care is actively being able to check in with yourself to see what you need. And that is a process that takes time to learn what works best for you, through the help of like therapy, reminiscing over memories, some good, some bad, some traumatic, some really overjoyful. And actually the best piece of advice that I got post grad was from Duran, just talking about like managing work life balance, and that it's this idea of time. And so the biggest thing that I use to help me think about self care is like time, and where I'm putting my energy, and how much time I'm putting certain energies into time. Because when you're on the clock for your job, like that's your company's time, but after that it's your time, and you should make sure that you're spending your time doing what makes you happy, what is responsible, and for whatever, if you have responsibilities to yourself or to your family or your dog, and making sure that you are leading like the life that you want to live. And I'll popcorn to someone else. I'm not going to call anyone out.
No, that's great, Alex. I actually want to pick up on something that you said, because I think I'm in a little bit of a different situation in that since leaving UVA, so I was at UVA from 2019 through 2020 and then left in the middle of a global pandemic. And so I really had to reevaluate, what does self-care look like, not only when my personal world has changed so much from like not being a student, but also when the global world has changed so much and everything feels different and things feel heavy, and how do we sift through that? And so I think when I was a student, self-care was like, oh, I have an hour, I don't have to do homework. I'll watch Netflix, or I'll connect with a friend, or I'll read a book. Whereas now I don't have the homework burden, but it's like the daily burden of just existing in this time feels so heavy. And it's tough because you can't always get a break from that. So I think for me, self-care is figuring out how to prioritize structuring ways to support myself and just continuing on in spaces, in all spaces that I'm a part of, right? What do I need to support my engagement with regards to interacting with people, or with regards to being, absorbing all that's happening. And so really just carving out space and being intentional with my priorities is what self-care looks like. And that was a big shift from being a student to now, right? Like when I was a student, and I'm sure you all can relate to this, but like you do a million activities and you have classes and there's no end. So what do you do when there is space in your life, and how do you reorganize your priorities so that that space is used in a way that fills your well, so you can continue to be the person you want to be in all spaces?
I can add something. So when I think about self-care, especially post-grad, I think I echo a lot of what Jess had mentioned about the idea of, what do you do when you have this time that seems like you have this delineation of like what is work and what is personal life. Like most people will have a 9 to 5. Some people have stuff after 5 p.m. But even then, there's this idea of like, oh, this is where work ends and this is where your time begins. And so thinking about, I think something that's been helpful for me is like understanding, okay, well, I should be able to implement some sort of self-care in all facets of my life, whether that's in my personal world or even at work. Some of the things that I think about is like, at work, since I work with a wide variety of people and have like a lot of meetings, I think a lot about, okay, who are the individuals that when I meet with them, they bring me so much joy and they bring me so much positive energy. And so how can I balance meetings with those folks with meetings that might seem a little more stressful? And so I think a lot about that when it comes to self-care, where I feel like as a student, everything was kind of just mixed in all together, while now people talk a lot about the separation between work and personal life. But I think I've come to realize that there is a way to insert self-care into your working life. And how do you go about making sure that you're also taking care of yourself in that space so that you feel like you're productive, or in whatever way you feel fulfilled in your job too. So that's kind of what I think about self-care too, as it relates to post-grad.
God, there's so much, variation in how we think about think about self-care. So for me, I like, when we think about self-care, we're usually thinking of like Netflix, laying on your bed, like chilling. I feel like what's been really helpful for me recently is stuff that kind of boosts, sorry, my sense of like self-efficacy. Just like, work has been kind of like frustrating, doing research, but whenever I go into the station as an EMT or a firefighter, I feel like in a weird way, even though it's technically extra work for me, I feel like that in its own self is a form of self-care. Like, I feel like, oh my God, like this kind of being able to give back to the community in a way. And, that doesn't necessarily have to be a definition of self-care for everyone, but I feel like that's been something that's really been helpful for me. The past, past 12 months of torture. But I think something we have to also recognize about self-care is that it's also not something that's comfortable. The decisions that we put in aren't always going to be comfortable. Alex was talking earlier about like, oh, who am I investing my time with? And sometimes I feel like we have to reevaluate, like, oh my God, has it really been good for me to invest this much time into these people? For example, like, I'm sorry, I'm taking up so much space, but like, I have a friend. My friend is of an East Asian descent, and she's been very impacted about some of the stuff that we've been seeing around the country lately, with regards to AAPI violence. And she told me that what's been really helpful for her is like, you know what? It's been really helpful for me to kind of put myself around a lot more Asian people and feel more supported. And that wasn't necessarily an easy decision for her to make. But yeah, and I feel like sometimes we kind of forget that self-care is something that has to be a little bit difficult, and that's okay. I yield my time for now.
Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you all. Those were great things. I think the time piece is really crucial, and I think Dwayne was kind of getting at like boundaries and how do you set that up for yourself. I love this question. What is something that is self-care for you that isn't an Instagrammable self-care moment?
Kind of following the boundaries topic is most of my toughest but like not best conversations, but best outcomes have been setting up boundaries. I think that like I had a little bit of a tumultuous time during college, and I like, you all know the culture at UVA. It was just go 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 and never really getting time to deal with some of those traumas. And then when I started digging deeper, I started realizing some childhood traumas that I'd had that I had also never really worked on, and how those things really affected my personality and how I interacted with people. And I realized that I need to set some boundaries. I need to set boundaries with some people in my family. I needed to set boundaries with people that I was related to that I wouldn't necessarily consider family. Needed to set boundaries with friends so friendships could be stronger and operate in a healthier way. Definitely setting boundaries romantically. No one's really stuck around so for me to call anyone anything, but those boundaries have been set, and I find myself happier because of setting those boundaries. Setting those boundaries because of work. And boundaries are a really difficult conversation to have. There's no way that you can Instagram them unless you want to put all of your stuff out there. But I think that they are so important because you like, some people see boundaries as being a little bit selfish, but I actually don't. I think that they're actually the way that you can be more selfless to people is by making sure that they know what you're capable to give. And then usually in boundary conversations, it's reciprocated. So you tell what you're capable to give, and the other person tells you what they're capable to give. And I think that you can it makes the relationships better. I didn't mean to mic drop. I just see everyone nodding.
It was so good. No, it was so good. And I'm truly sitting here trying to figure out how to just sit in that, because I think that's so important, of like establishing boundaries is difficult, but at the end of the day, it's been, yeah, truly transformative in terms of how I interact with other people. And I think that was one of the things that I was saying, and I don't know if this counts as Instagrammable or not, but for me, it's like, I'm carving out time when I'm not on my phone. I'm carving out time when I'm not on my computer. I'm carving out time when I don't have to be on. And that like idea of not having to be on all the time, I think is the biggest thing that I've been holding on to. That doesn't mean that I'm like, sitting and journaling about my feelings all the time, or like reading, which are all very valuable things. And I do all of those things, but that like, even if I'm just sitting and not having to be responding to an urgent email, or like not having to respond to a text or FaceTime. I mean, we're all so burnt out with screens now, especially. But even if this was not a time of intense screen heavy, work and interaction, I think that's still really important. It's just finding time to not be on. And I think that's a general thing that I'm struggling with, and I'm still trying to figure out the best ways to do, but it goes along with exactly what you were saying, Alex, of like setting up boundaries and knowing that you have limits, and that you can lean into those and really, take care of yourself in that way.
This is a little more concrete, and it's probably Instagrammable. I just choose not to Instagram it. But I think something that's been really helpful for me lately is just having people who are willing to deal with me and a lot of the rants that I've had. Lately, I've just been having a lot of issues at work, and so it's been helpful to have people like John O'Toole. I was on the phone with John O'Toole last night, and I was just going off, and John O'Toole was just doing her nails or whatever John O'Toole does best. But I think that is something that's been really helpful for me, and I think that's another testament to how self-care isn't something that's necessarily pretty. I got pretty nasty last night with some of my ranting. But yeah, I think that's another example of how self-care doesn't have to be something pretty or something that we can put on a frame. I mean, I guess I can put it on a frame and put it on my fridge, but yeah, y'all get it.
Yeah, I think when it comes to like non-Instagrammable self-care moments, the thing that comes to mind is like, so one of the biggest hardships that I've been having, especially with this pandemic and like going virtual, is feeling like I'm being productive, or at least producing or doing my job in the way that is not only fulfilling to me, but it's like doing justice to the people who are receiving the services. And I think it's been hard because like every day I have my to-do list, and like it never gets shorter. I'm doing things for work, but I don't think things are getting done. And so I think that has impacted a lot of my perception on like how effective am I at my job even. And so something that has been helpful, that's more of just like a small thing that I've developed into a habit, is like I have a journal and kind of put in my schedule there, but every day I've made it into a little bit more of a consistent thing to write down all the things that I finished that day, so that at the end of the day, even though I still have this really long to-do list, I have a pretty extensive like done list too. And that I can physically see that and be like, okay, cool. Like, even though I feel like I didn't make any headway, this is all the stuff that I've done. And that has helped so much around my own perception about my job and like my own worth in the job. So I think that's kind of like a small tangible thing that it's been nice, because I started off doing it and having to remind myself to do it, but now it's become kind of like secondhand nature to be like, okay, cool, the day's done. Let me just look at my list of stuff that I've finished for the day, and see where I'm at. And if I can at least get one thing done in a way that I feel proud of, that is like more than enough for me to feel fulfilled for that day. But it's hard. And like, I think there are days where I look at that list and I'm like, dang, I wish I could have gotten more done. And so it's like a continuous process of like really trying to deprogram myself into thinking that, oh, like you really need to finish this to-do list and finish all these things in order to feel like you're worthwhile in your position, when there's so many things that you're doing to fill up your time and service others that require that attention and deserve that attention. And so how can you go about shifting your mindset? So again, that's like something small that I've done, not really Instagrammable. Could be, I guess, maybe. But yeah.
I do have a good Instagram self-care tip. Um, after college, I unfollowed anyone that wasn't following me. Not necessarily a business, because businesses can't be following a bunch of people like that. Um, yeah, I'm really happy to report that everyone on this panel still follows me, so no awkwardness here. But I don't know. It was just like a very like little thing, and sometimes got a little bit more time consuming than I would have liked it to. But it was just like so nice that it was like people that if they weren't taking the time to see what's going on in my life, I do not need to take the reciprocal time and like see what's going on in theirs. And I don't know, it was just like, and even though there were some people that I was like, oh, they're not following me anymore, I kind of forgot about them. So like it's totally like I think doing even little things like that may seem petty, but are really like for your happiness. I think it's as long as you're not being like a huge jerk to people for no reason. Like I think that's fine.
I love that. Y'all are dropping some gems to quote Duran. So thank you for all of your answers on that. All these questions are great. So shout out to John O'Toole and our other colleague Shelby Gibson for putting these together, and if any of the panelists had input on them. But who are the people who make you feel cared for or have, helped you through your messy, imperfect self-care journey?
I mean, I can go first. Like, I think the people that I first think about is my younger sister. So I currently live in Charlottesville. I live with my little sister. And so we're kind of together pretty much all the time. And it's been nice because I think there are parts of my life, especially with my family and my parents, that I can't really share I can't fully divulge or process with them without some sort of pushback or something like that. So it's been nice to have her as someone that I can vent to, but also still like get that perspective and advice, especially if like I'm the one in the wrong or if I'm the one doing something that's toxic to myself that I personally don't even know. It's good to like have that other person who's a little bit more of a peer, but a bit closer than someone like that's outside of the family.
Yeah, that's huge. And I'll not to steal your idea, but same, like I have a younger sibling, which has been super helpful and just like going through life and being messy together and understanding that we're kind of coming from similar positions. And not to gas John O'Toole too much, but I will say like people like John O'Toole have been super influential in terms of my understanding of self-care. Like I don't know if any of y'all have gone to her office, but she always has like puzzles out and it's such a warm and inviting space. And she just knows how to like invite people in and understand you can have a meeting and be productive, but you can still, while you're doing that, like take care of yourself and be a whole person. So first of all, thanks for that. She also has these amazing like potluck like dinners that are just iconic if you haven't gone. But it's great. And so I think like having people in my personal realm that are also focused on being their full selves in all spaces is really helpful. And even if I don't see John O'Toole every day, like the times we've interacted, the times that we've been able to connect in that way have been super helpful. So seeing others do it is great, which is why I'm really excited to be sharing time with you all today and hearing your tips and tricks, because I think we learn by being around people who are also on a similar journey. But definitely my younger brother and I have been talking about that a lot this past year, as both of us are stuck at home with parents. And so that's been a whole separate conversation, but needless to say, it's great to have a community of people thinking the same and helping you out.
I think that self-care and adulting requires you to kind of accept, learn, and learn to love the fact that like your relationships in adulthood are going to change. I personally think for the better. But you're going to see people probably less than what you're used to in college. And so I think that one of the beautiful parts of adulthood is kind of learning each other's cadences and learning what your friendships kind of stand on. So with John O'Toole, we've been friends since I was in 8th grade. We go way back. But we I would say that we talk / hang out with each other like every couple of months. and like every time it's like nothing has changed and it's super fun, but we do it for like a lot of hours at one time. And so that way like 3 to 6 months can pass again. And then it's like we do it again. But I think that when I was in college, I would have thought that doing that, like I would have been like, oh my God, that must much not mean that we're like good friends or anything. And that's so not true. And I think that like learning, like I have a really good amount of friends that I like kind of have not on rotation, but I like try to stagger like when I see friends just because you kind of run out of things to talk about without the drama of college. um, and so making sure that we're having like really fruitful relationships still, but like knowing that each other's busy. And then like there's some friends that I do talk to every day because we can just literally shoot the shit and talk about nothing. Or like I have one friend that will just like FaceTime each other and like be scrolling on Instagram and it's just like nice to be in each other's presence. Or like so I live with my mom and my grandma, and so making sure that I go in and have like a good conversation with my grandma like once a week, like for 30 minutes, and then with my mom, like knowing that she's pretty tired a lot. And so why like watching Lifetime movies with her like 2 times out of the week or watching 90 Day Fiance with her is like the majority of our relationship. And so I think that that's the biggest part. Like I have a lot of people that have like taken me to my self-care journey, and it's through like all of the friendships that I've had and like learning how those operate differently in adulthood, and especially in the pandemic world. But it's not like the funnest process in the world, but I think that it's really important and it sets you up for the rest of your life in terms of how you interact with people.
Yeah, so oh my God. So yeah, like there's like, family. Jonathan was always nice, except until she's not. Uh, but I think something that's been just kidding, we like Jonathan, we love her. Something that's been really helpful for me with the whole self-care thing is, like I mentioned earlier, I'm trying to apply to med schools right now. It has been super helpful to have people who are kind of going through the process or have gone through the process already. And these people, like, they're not necessarily there to tell you like, oh my God, you're the best person, you're gonna get in everywhere, or they've been like, I don't know about this, but they're just kind of there and they get what you're going through. And that has been so helpful for me because these people have just been able to validate like the anxiety I've had, like the times when I wanted to cry and be like, oh my God, I can't do it, blah, blah, blah. That's been really helpful for me. And from like a more work perspective, there have been a lot of people who've kind of been able to validate the frustrations that a lot of us have had with, trying to manage, going into the lab, trying to get research done, but also our advisors who don't go into work and who don't really get the experiences that we've had. I think something that's been happening with the pandemic is the divide between our supervisors and the people who do research has kind of, that gap has grown a little bit. So it's been nice to just sit down with people at work and just recognize that, hey, we're kind of in the same boat. And it's just been really comforting to have people who understand and validate some of the experiences that we've been going through at work. And it's also been nice that like we kind of just deal with each other at work. So we kind of have our own box of self-care waiting for us at work. So that's just been really helpful for me the past few months.
Was that everybody? Sorry, I think I have like space for a second. Okay, awesome. Thank you. When stressful or difficult life events happen, because that's life, right? How do you know when to seek help, when your usual means of coping aren't helping? So if, for me, it's I need to go for a walk and listen to some music and just kind of tune out the world. Like when that's not helping, has there been a time when maybe self-care, however that looks for you, hasn't been helpful?
Yeah, I can share. And I think, so I put this in the chat, but I think that one area of self-care that I try really hard to focus on is like, how can I be the best support system for myself that I can be? And like, what does that require of me? And so not am I just going through the motions of like, okay, this is supposed to make me feel better, but like, okay, but how am I actually supporting myself? Am I challenging myself? Am I giving myself a soft place to land? And speaking only from my experience, and everyone's individual experiences are different, but there's times when I know that that's not enough. Like if I've done all I can and I like went for that walk, or I sat with myself and reflected and had serious and meaningful conversations with people, and I'm still feeling the disconnect, like that's when I know, okay, I can't, this is not a me thing. This is something I need that's larger than me and that I need help getting through. So I just think I personally, I rely on my like internal compass of like, if this feels like it's leading me in the wrong direction, or I'm not holding on to myself, or I feel off, or I know that this is a heavy weight that I'm struggling to carry by myself. I think that's when I turn to other folks. And so, for example, my second year, the fall semester was hands down one of the worst semesters of my life. I had a lot of personal issues going on, and like larger things were happening on grounds, and it was not a good time to be a student. It was not a good time to be me at the time. It was just not fun or bearable, to be quite frank. And so I struggled with knowing where that line was. I don't know if you all feel this way, but sometimes it's like, okay, if I just put my head down and keep working, I'll see through it. Or like I can just charge through and I'll see to the other side. And like, this is okay, next week will be better. And then you get to next week and you're like, okay, the week after next will be better. And it's just, you're not getting any traction. And so just having those check-ins with myself of like, okay, is it time to turn to other folks? Is that, and that's a tough conversation. And it's one that it took me months to figure out. But when I finally was able to, again, going back to the idea of like how to be your best support system, part of that is having those conversations and saying, okay, is this outside of my realm? And can I go to CAPS or go to therapy or talk with family and get external support? So kind of a long-winded way of saying, I think it's just sometimes you have to like, yes, keep trying to be there for yourself, but don't put the burden on yourself to do that, because oftentimes there's external support that can make that process a lot easier. I don't know if I answered the question, but that's my personal experience.
So I think that sometimes, self-care is recognizing that you're not going to be great at it all the time. So in my current role in my job, I was not very happy. It's like a sales quantitatively gold job, and like I loved my company, but I was so unhappy in my job, and I was like applying to another job in my company, and I knew that I wasn't going to be on a path of healing until I found out about that other job. And I had a feeling I was going to get it, but I didn't want to be cocky. I did get it. And then things did start to feel better. And so sometimes self-care is knowing that you just have to wait it out until you find out about one thing that's really weighing on you, and then being able to move past it. I also think that I always love going on a good drive and listening to music. And when I turn off the audio because every song is annoying me, that's when I know that I'm really in a bad place. And so that's when I know that either I need to kind of cry by myself in my room, no one talk to me, or not scream at my mom, but yell at my mom, what's going on, because I'm just so upset, and I just have so much emotion and I just need to get it out. And my mom, obviously my mom's been with me for 24 years. She knows what to do in that situation and how to handle it. So props to her. Don't know how she doesn't drink a glass of wine every time talking to me. But she doesn't. But I think that there's kind of this stigma around and everyone's breaking points look different. And I think there are certain breaking points where there are legitimate breaking points and you need to seek outside help. But there are some breaking points that are mild breaking points where you do really just need to cry or rant to someone, or quote unquote explode, but not really, because you're just like saying your emotions and saying your feelings and someone's just listening. So I don't really think that's exploding. But there's the stigma around that. And like, knowing that UVA is a very exercise oriented school, which I did not partake in that much, but there's this idea in exercise that for some forms of exercise that you push your muscles to the point where they start to break, and you do it so that they can build back stronger. Well, if you break your muscles to the point where they can't rebuild at all, then they're not going to serve you any use. But if you go to a point where you do feel that tension and you do feel that stress, and then you let that relief happen, you're going to come back stronger. And not saying that you should put yourself through stressful situations, shouldn't seek help, because you definitely should, but knowing that like it's okay to cry, it's okay to have those rants, is really important, just because you're going to have them. Like that's just the way life is. And I think that accepting that you'll have those is like a better way to accepting and self-loving yourself, which is a huge part of self-care. I don't know, that might have been very controversial to say. I don't know.
So I think I kind of want to answer this question from like a UVA pre-med perspective, especially one who's kind of going through this process after graduating, because I anticipate that a couple of us might be so. I feel like for a lot of us, I mean, and it doesn't just have to be pre-med people, UVA has kind of put this idea in our brains of putting 10 pounds of things in a 5-pound bag. And we just kind of like do too much. And I feel like one of the things that we have to recognize sometimes is that we cannot do it all. A lot of us try to be like superheroes and do all these things. And I think there's this discomfort of recognizing, okay, I cannot do all of these things. And at some point, something has got to go. And I think sometimes we fall into the default of, oh, I can't do that. Like I was talking to a student a couple of weeks ago, and they were like, oh, I really need to take this class. I really need to do this internship. I really need to do all of that. And I think sometimes we kind of have to fall into this weird discomfort of, do I really need to do that? Like, do I really, really need to do that? Will I die if I do not do this one thing? That's a little extreme, but I think that's something that's been kind of helpful for me recently, having to throw away stuff that I feel like I really needed, but then maybe like sitting down for a moment and really being critical of yourself and asking like, okay, is this, how necessary do I really need this? And how, and is it worth it to kind of keep sacrificing my own sanity in order to get this one thing? And I feel like the answer 90% of the time is no, it's not worth it, right? Like, throw away that internship, don't take that class, stay at home. I don't know, but yeah, I think it's a weird decision that we have to kind of think about in certain situations. And again, it all depends on like, okay, do we feel like we're kind of nearing that breaking point?
Yeah, I think when considering just like breaking points, I think a lot about like how my body is feeling. And, I've slowly come to realize that like body scans are super important in terms of like being able to understand, okay, why does my chest feel tight when I'm talking about this? Or there's a lot happening in life and my body feels really weird. And I wouldn't say I'm great at this, because I think I'm still trying to learn when to listen to my body and like the cues that it's giving, because I think a lot of times we take for granted that there are a lot of somatic and like there are a lot of like somatic things that your body will tell you before you even know that you're stressed or before you even know you're at a breaking point. And so being able to figure out ways to come into consciousness around that is super important. Like there have definitely been times during this pandemic when I should have listened to my body, but I didn't. And then I like broke down in the middle of work, and, people were asking like, hey, like, what's up? And so it's like one of those things where, I think a lot about, okay, like, what can I do to understand why I'm feeling this way? Or if I feel something that feels off, I'm like, wait, like, is my body telling me something that I personally may not even be aware of? Because there might be times when you're like, oh, like, I do this thing a lot where I'm like, okay, cool, like things are stressful, but like, I'm okay. I can like move forward. Like, we're good. We can keep going. I have people around me. I have my support system. Like, I shouldn't feel stressed. But my body is telling me other things. And I'm like, wow, like, why does my chest feel heavy? And like, why do I feel like I just want to sleep for the rest of the day? And so like small things like that. And I think it takes a while to come to that realization. And I definitely did not have that realization as a student. And right now I'm starting to be more comfortable with like vocalizing when I feel certain things, especially with my body. And so knowing that like, it's not going to be perfect. And there are going to be times when you're like, oh, like everything I'm doing should be working, but it's not. What the heck is going on? And knowing that it's not your fault, or no, like it's nothing's wrong with you if that happens. It's really just a part of like understanding, okay, like at what point are the things that I'm doing just not going to work for me? And being open to the fact of like accepting help and being able to create those pathways for yourself.
Can I add on to that for like a few seconds, Jonathan? Like, yeah, so I think undergrad has really, it was really good at training me to have like this weird metabolism where I can keep working until 3 a.m. Like I was able to like read chapters of books like for like long amounts of time. And your body does put in a lot of work to try to get all of that done, but it can only do so much. Like right now, I don't know how I was able to do all that during undergrad. I'm like, oh my God, like I learned all these organic chemistry mechanisms in like a night. I can't do that anymore. And that's, I feel like that was one of the weirdest learning blocks of like adulthood. It's like, I cannot function anymore past midnight. And it's so sad. I wish I can do it, but I can't do it anymore. And I feel like that was just a really weird like learning curve for me.
You all are, I really appreciate you all being vulnerable and sharing like the messy, unglorified, non-Instagrammable things, right? Like the non-curated images of ourselves. And I really appreciate you all speaking to like some of the emotions and the feelings of like, throw that away, or like cry, scream, like yell about it. Let's go. I think this is a fun question. So you all have talked about the wide variety of ways that we take care of ourselves, what self-care looks like to you. As we think about the expansive ways to take care of yourself without spending a lot of money, what's a low or like no cost budget thing that you do to take care of yourself?
So and this kind of goes into one piece of self-care and like setting up boundaries. There's a lot of pressure around our age to move around a lot. I don't know what I personally don't understand it. Like, but so I knew that when I was in college, I wanted to move to like New York or DC. I didn't really want to move back home. And then I had to, because did not have a job, and moved back home and realized how much I was incredibly in love with Richmond, mainly because of just all the amazing things that that it offers as a city. And then realizing, oh wait, like I kind of want to live out my adulthood here and raise future kids here, and maybe like live out the rest of my days here. I don't really want to move. I just want to travel. And so that was like a big turning point for me. But like part of why I love it is because the views are incredible. And so my like favorite low cost activity is going to one of two of my favorite parks. One's Bird Park. It has these huge like lakes in the park, and like there's a bunch of geese. I don't really like birds, but like seeing the geese is kind of funny to me because they're just honk, and I don't know, they're just funny. But like I love just like sitting there and watching people like just be in the park. I love walking around the park. Like again, incredible views. There's also a Libby Hill Park, which has some of the best view, like the best sunset view of the city. And just driving my car and sitting in those places or walking around, it is just incredible. And like it's free. I mean, you have to pay for gas, but we're gonna ignore that cost for a moment. And just like sitting there and like seeing the views, and then reminding myself like, oh yeah, like I'm making the decision for myself to stay here and not feel the pressure to move other places because I really love it here. And it always reminds me like that I'm choosing myself always when I choose to stay in Richmond.
Yeah, I kind of am on the same length as Alex. Something that I've been, especially with this pandemic, and given that I'm currently working from home, a lot of my day is spent in front of a screen. And so trying to be really intentional about going outside. And I've been trying to make it a goal to like insert some sort of movement into my life every day, whether that's getting up from this chair and just like doing stretches, or planning to go on a hike with friends, or any of that stuff. But just figuring out ways that I could take myself like physically away from the screen and away from the responsibilities that come from the screen, because that's so needed. And it's been really helpful being with my sister, and we also have like a puppy too, so it's been a lot of fun. Like I think the dog gives us a lot of excuses to like go outside and be like, okay, well, even if I feel like I'm too busy to go outside, I'm like, I need to for the sake of this other being that I'm taking care of. And so in a way, it kind of forces me to like insert the very self-care that I sometimes do neglect. And Charlottesville it's like nice because there's just so many different areas that you can go to, whether that's like in the mountains or by the river, or any of that stuff. And it's just very varying. And most of those places are accessible to anyone, and there's like no cost and ample parking in those spaces too, because they're not super close to UVA either. So kind of looking into that and tying it back to that one simple goal of like, what can I do to break this monotonous cycle of standing in front of a screen all the time, and just insert some sort of movement. And yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. And I echo both of what you said. I think for me, self-care, like the tangible things that I do for self-care, is anything that reminds me that I'm human. Like anything that reminds me that I'm a living, breathing person that I have five senses. I'm like in this world, I'm moving and going about my life, not as a machine, but as a person. Like anything that can do that is huge. And I think there's a lot of things that can be done for low budget or no cost. For example, like I try to, even if it's just like a granola bar or yogurt or something, but just like carving out time when I'm eating to like sit and notice that I'm eating, and like not be dashing off to the next meeting, or like not responding to emails while I'm having lunch. So that's huge. Another like pro tip is, if you are, whatever your emotional state is, lights off in your room, like the music blasting, having some kind of like sensory experience, whether that's, you know, music or reading or whatever that is for you. For me, it's definitely music. Like if I can have 30 minutes before I go to bed to just like listen to music or a podcast, I'm set. So again, just anything that reminds me that I am a person is huge. And so just being, I think, present and intentionally present, going outside, huge. Long walks, love them. Because they remind me that, hey, there is a world outside of this like square that I've been speaking to you all through today. And there's so much that life has that's not just productivity. So yeah, anything that does that is where I usually turn to.
This is gonna be so cheesy, but honestly, I'm just now recognizing that being in this little room has been a weird form of self-care for me today. Even though John O'Toole's in it, I'm kidding. I love John O'Toole. Again, sorry I'm like hating on her, but I feel like just like getting, like being able to speak, you know, being able, like feeling validated, feeling supported with a group of people. I feel like that in itself is its own form of self-care. And really, even if I was just talking to like a teddy bear or something right now, that's just been so helpful for me to just like kind of like calm down a little bit, slammed like, put my foot on the brake. I think it's just been really helpful just trying to just being vulnerable with this group of people. And I feel like I feel like it's, obviously I didn't pay any money to, or at least I hope I don't have to pay any money to be in this room. But yeah, I feel like it is worth it to try to make an effort to just really find that support system, and then just go on Zoom and shoot the shit or whatever. That's just been I'm sorry, but that's been really helpful for me today.
No, I love that. I'm not opposed to cursing. That's okay. We're all human, right? Oh, you all are wonderful. I'm like sad that our time is coming to a close. So my final question is, what is something that you wish you had or would have told your newly graduated self regarding self-care after college?
How much time do we have? I'm joking. So many things, but I think two things that I would tell myself are be okay with change. I think that when I graduated, I thought that everything was going to stay stagnant. Like I thought my relationships were going to stay stagnant. I thought my personality, or what I thought my personality was going to stay stagnant. Like I thought what I thought was comfortable was going to stay stagnant. I thought I was going to get one job that I was going to want to keep for the rest of my life. Like I just was not comfortable with change at all. And there are so many changes that happen when you graduate. And so you better get comfortable with them or else you're going to be really uncomfortable for your entire life. And kind of going into that is to lean into authenticity. Like I had my entire life been characterized as like this super sweet person, and like I am a really nice person, but I'm also kind of bitchy too. And like that's totally okay. Like I think that once I stopped pushing off parts of myself that I thought were maybe like not the most desirable or maybe weren't like the norm, but they were parts that made me really happy. Like not saying that being mean makes me really happy, I want to clarify that. But like ranting like makes me happy, and like making sure that I do nice things for people because I want to makes me happy and not because I feel like I have to, and realizing the difference between when I am feeling those things. Like I shaved my head after college and I thought that I had to love it, and I actually hated it. I had huge body dysmorphia and like really did not like the way that I looked with it. And so like growing out my hair so I could get like hair again was a really big moment of self-care for me. And like that was a moment of leaning into authenticity because everyone's always like, oh, you should love the way you look at all the time. Like really just leaning into authenticity and being okay to accept change, knowing that not every decision you make is permanent is really like the biggest thing.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I was just going to say, as someone that also graduated in the middle of a global pandemic, I wish I had told myself that it's okay to focus, to Alex's point, to focus on like rebuilding my life, and rebuilding who I want to be moving forward, right? Like I had employment, I had a degree, I was excited, but then that all went away when COVID hit and I like lost my job. And it was like, how do I focus on not only getting those things back, but also making sure that I'm intentional about the kind of person I want to be. And I feel like I've changed so much over this past year, even though I've simply never left my house, because I've been intentional about how do I want to rebuild what my priorities are, what matters to me, and who I want to be. So just making sure that is, I wish I'd viewed that as being on the same level as like finding a job or finding where I'm going to live. And I didn't at the time. And had I done that earlier, I think I would have been happier, but very grateful that I stumbled into that now.
Yeah, I think like what I really wish I told myself is that you do need to put in the time and the work into figuring out what self-care means for you. And what I mean by that is, a lot of you all are in classes right now, studying, writing papers, all that stuff. Like, ask yourself, how much time did I put into my classes last night? And then I want you to take that number, multiply it by 2, and that is the time that you should be, that's the minimum amount of time you should be devoting to figuring out what self-care means for you. Because yeah, and you need to do it. I think like me, last semester, I kind of fell into a weird trap of just being super overwhelmed, and I ended up going to the emergency room for it. So, and I think a big part of it also, like Jonathan will recognize this, is that this, if you don't do self-care, it kind of starts to kind of creep up into your physical health, and you do need to take care of yourself because, like, your body responds to stress, and we cannot emphasize that enough.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would probably tell my newly graduated self is this idea that, like, I don't think you're ever going to perfect what self-care means to you, or I don't think it's ever going to get to a point where you'll have fully gotten to the point of fully taking care of yourself, which is like kind of a daunting thing. At least, I think about that. I'm like, it's kind of a daunting thing to think about, because you really do, the goal is that you want to get to a point where you can take care of yourself and you have your routine and you know what's meaningful to you, and all of these things that will help you get through difficult situations, stress, etc., have been set up. But there are times when cracks will happen, and like, that's okay. And that's going to be all part of this journey of kind of figuring out what works for you in that moment and what doesn't, and what worked for you before may not work for you now. So it's really just like knowing and being able to like appreciate yourself in those moments, because I think even when the breaks happen, I think about when I broke down recently, and I'm like, you know what, that was kind of weird, because I don't like being like a super emotional person, especially with like other people around. But I'm also like, I am grateful for my body and my mind for like taking me to that point and like allowing me to like have this space to cry, vent, whatever, even though like afterwards I may have felt a little embarrassed or like a little bit like, why the heck did I do that? But I think also appreciating those moments, because I think like that's still such a testament to the fact that like you are worth it, and like the way that you go about taking care of yourself may look different than other people's. It may look different from what you had wanted to do a month ago or maybe a month later, but it still doesn't devalue you in that point of your life.
Awesome. Thank you all. So that does bring us to time. And if our panelists can stick around, if folks have questions that they, or they want to talk to folks individually, I am going to put a link in the chat right now for folks to fill out an evaluation for the session. That is how we will be doing the drawing for the gift certificates as well as the diploma frame. And as the chat continues to push it up, I will copy and paste it in there again. We will notify folks of the gift card recipients next week. And so I'm